Alright. Hello everybody. I'm Joey, and I'm going to talk about the American brand of rehabilitation. And the reason why I decided to bring this up is because one of my classmates in high school actually went to prison when he was 17. He was given, he sold heroin, so then he was sentenced to 30 years in prison when he was 17 years old, and I just think that's completely wrong. So, that's for the introduction. In recent years, the United States Department of Corrections has witnessed an unprecedented overcrowding of its prisons. I mean, our prisons are I'll show you some pictures later of it. There are just way too many people inside of our prisons. And because of that, there are some new dangers to prisoners and to security guards and to people outside of prison as well. Nobody quite seems to understand that when prisons become dangerous, then actually all of society becomes dangerous. We tend to think of prisoners as being locked in some place where we can't see them, but actually they do influence our lives as well. This presentation seeks to explore the costs of prisons, the conditions within the prisons, the effectiveness of the rehabilitation, why we have such overcrowded conditions, and how the system may be improved. The system, unfortunately, I can't really come up with a really good way of how the system can be improved in general. I mean, if I'm able to come up with an idea, then I'm sure the US government already could have done it. So, in this I'll cover, of course, the overview, economic costs, prison conditions, overcrowding, and how they all come together, basically. So, there are currently roughly this number, although it does fluctuate a lot because people come in and out of prison. But there are currently about 2,193,798 inmates in correctional facilities across the United States. Second is China at 1,548,000. But we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. We have 737 prisoners for every 100,000 people, even above Russia. And here's just a graph showing that details this. As you can see, the United States has far more prisoners than any other country on the earth. Anyway, so the lack of government funding has resulted in a massive private prison industry worth $3 billion in 2017. The way private prisons work is that state governments will attempt to defund prisons to be able to control their budgets, and when they do that, the contract is leased out to private companies, and whoever bids the least amount is able to take the contract. Now, recidivism in prisons nationwide is at an all-time high. It's 67% of all released prisoners are rearrested within 3 years, and 76.6% are rearrested within 5 years. The jail occupancy level in the United States is 107.6%, of course, and the prisons have been a great source of, that's one thing, is that prisons have been a great source for cheap labor, because you don't need to pay prisoners as much when they're working inside of the prisons. Usually they're paid about $2 or $3 an hour. It's a great way to manufacture things, I guess. So here's another thing that I should probably mention, although we're not going to really delve into this. 64% of Americans are white, and 39% of incarcerated Americans are white. 13% of black Americans, 13% of Americans are black, but 40% of incarcerated Americans, of prisoners in America, are black. For the Latinos, it's about the right level, and for the Native Americans, it's about the right level as but we do tend to catch more black people than any other group. Now, as for the cost of incarceration, I will cover the cost of construction, cost of warehousing, and other miscellaneous costs, because you cannot completely measure what the costs are. As for the cost of prison construction, there is no publication regarding the construction costs of prisons, because every state has cost variables such as the price for land, labor, and transportation. For example, a prison in Connecticut costs about, a maximum security prison in Connecticut costs about $17,800,000, while the similar prison in Kansas would cost about $15,500,000. Moreover, but it is still an astronomical figure. But moreover, the cost of constructions tend to go over budget in most cases. However, it is still minuscule when considering that the costs of maintenance exceed the cost of construction in just a few years. And so the cost of maintenance, I'll come to that. We call it warehousing in the United States, which is actually a very good word for it, because that's what we do. But according to Bureau of Justice statistics, the annual taxpayer cost for warehousing each inmate was $31,286 a year. This, of course, comes up to about $80 billion. In 2010, it was $80 billion, which is $87 billion in today's dollars. Of course, 10% is paid by the federal government, 57% is paid by the states, and 33% is paid by the local governments. It puts, I forgot to mention it here, but it does put a very large economic strain on the state and local governments, which is the reason why they mostly tend to start turning to private prisons. Now, there are various other factors, such as welfare and public housing for families of prisoners, because they can't support their families when they're incarcerated. But there is no actual figure for this, just because there's this sense of political correctness in which we're not really allowed to say why the person is on welfare, so there is no actual implication of that. But in 2009, it was found that for every $1 spent on each inmate, 6 cents were spent on parole services, which comes up to a very sizable amount, about $4 or $5 million. As you can see right here, this is prison spending in the United States. The line at the top, the dotted line, is the per capita expenditures for each prisoner. And as you can see, it's just been going up since organized crime basically started in the United States. It did go down a little bit because we put a lot of prisoners on parole as a way of decreasing the budget, but it is still what it is. Now, as for the prison conditions in the United States, I will cover dangers created by the prison policies and danger caused by prisoners themselves, because it's not really one side's fault for why the prisons are so terrible in America. It's all of our fault. So as for the prison policies, not all the blame for abhorrent prison policies inside of prisons go to prisoners. Most of this is due to the lack of funding by the government, but also to negligence by private prison companies. So for the first case study, it is in Perryville, Arizona, in 2009. Arizona prison health care was privatized in 2009 by the state budget, resulting in a drop in medical spending by about $30 million. This caused the number of prison deaths to go to 50 in the entire state in the first 8 months of 2013 after the budget was privatized. After the prison was privatized, nobody actually wanted to take this contract. None of the private prison companies wanted the contract because it paid so little for medical spending for every single prisoner in the entire state. But in 2003, they finally went ahead with it and sold it to the Geo Group. But in the 2 years before they privatized healthcare, 37 died in 2 years. In 2013, in 8 months, 50 died after they privatized healthcare. This is the cause of deaths of Arizona's prisons in 2013, as reported by the state government. The blue is deaths, which is it can range from anything. It could be drug abuse. It could be that they just became old and died, because usually that's not the case. It could be that they were hallucinating and they just jumped off something. And then there's suicides, which is of course suicide, and homicides, which usually are stabbings among prisoners. Now, in this prison, Perryville, Arizona, one female inmate named Reagan Clarine was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison while she was pregnant. She had a C-section to give birth to a daughter in a prison medical facility. But because the prisons were so underfunded, the medical system was so underfunded by these private companies, that the doctors actually used a remedy from the early 1900s for wounds, how they treated wounds in World War I, basically, where they took McDonald's sugar packets, wrapped them up with gauze, and just put it on her wound, and then released her back into the prison's general population. If that's absolutely unimaginable until you hear this story, which is in Walnut Grove, Mississippi in 2012. They cut the prison budget in Mississippi as well, and the prison was outsourced to Geo Group, one of the largest corporations for private prisons. Now, this youth prison in Mississippi was investigated by the Southern Poverty Law Center in 2012. What they found was this. They found that the prisons, in a letter by the SPLC to the state executive highlighted that prison administrators were, one, deliberately indifferent. They just did not care about sexual misconduct between correctional officers and prisoners, child prisoners. So then and then in the next one they had, they just used excessive force against the youth in a regular practice, basically. They just did not care about gang affiliations within the ranks of the correctional staff. That blows me away. All right. Well, they just did not care about the serious risk of harm to youth posed by fellow youth. They were deliberately indifferent to the suicide risks and serious mental health issues inside of its prison, and they were deliberately indifferent to the serious medical needs of its youth. The letter also highlighted that during morning and evening hours, there were 2 officers responsible for between 128 and 256 youth inmates inside of the prison, which just led the prison to become hell, basically. There were people stabbing each other, doing drugs everywhere. The SPLC also found that staff sexual misconduct with youth in their custody occurred on a monthly basis at a minimum. Moreover, the staff themselves were found to not have prior knowledge of chemical agents before using them on prisoners. So there was just this absolute lack of training of officers, and there were not enough of them. Which, I'll get into that later. So, next part is the security housing units. I'm sure that you all know what this is, but you just never heard the word SHU. Basically, it used to be known as solitary confinement. I think. So, anyway, it used to be known as solitary confinement. In the SHU, there are two kinds of inmates. Those who must be isolated because they might be killed by other prisoners, and the kind of prisoners that want to kill other prisoners, and so they have to isolate them inside of these little pods by themselves. Inmates in the SHU are kept inside of their cells with absolutely no human interaction for 23 hours a day, with 1 hour to exercise and take showers. Their exercising is usually bouncing a ball off a wall or something like that. They can talk to the prison guards as long as they're inside the cage. The cells are about 80 square feet. If you don't know how much 80 square feet is, I'll show you in a minute. But these, anyway, these conditions make prisoners paranoid, depressed, or even insane in many cases, and some have reported to hallucinate behind bars, and some resort to cutting themselves or even committing suicide inside of the security housing units. And this is basically what it looks like. It's not much, and they're kept in there for 23 hours a day, just simply because it's so much cheaper to leave prisoners, put prisoners, dangerous prisoners, inside of a room by themselves instead of actually rehabilitating them. Of course, it does go both ways, in which you cannot. There are some people that cannot be rehabilitated, which is probably the people who belong here. But if you throw everybody in, there's going to be problems when they get out, which leads to the question of whether or not prisons are actually made for the inmates' rehabilitation, or simply there to warehouse the unwanted members of society. The inmates in the SHU are obviously unfit to go back to society because they're kept inside of an 80 square foot cell in the early 1900s, it was called the hole, solitary confinement. They were kept there for about 2 or 3 days at most. Now we keep them there for years, basically. If they have a gang affiliation, if they have a proven gang affiliation, we'll keep them inside of that cell right there for 3, 4, 5 years. They're not able to go back to society, and since they're depressed, angry, and possibly mentally ill, they naturally come back, which of course leads to the high recidivism that I just mentioned earlier. Next, I'm going to talk about prison gangs, basically the prisoners who think that they run the prison. An unforeseen consequence of the dangerous prison atmosphere was the rise of prison gangs, like you can see here. Really nasty looking people. Anyway, these groups arose mainly in the 1950s to the 80s for 2 reasons, which is to provide protection for their members and members of their race. And of course, to make money, because they couldn't support their families outside of prison. Their main source of income is from controlling drugs, gambling, and male prostitution within prison walls. Prison gangs have become the commanders of street gangs due to their monopolization of violence inside of prisons. That works because street gangs, people inside of street gangs expect to go to prison someday. When they go to prison, if they meet a member of a prison gang that they had some sort of problem with, the prison gang is going to kill them inside of prison. So they basically have to take orders from the prison gangs. Now, to join a prison gang, an inmate must stab someone with a homemade knife, or undergo a beating, or kill somebody. That's how you join a prison gang. Members can only leave through death. You kill somebody to join, and you get killed if you want to leave. It's how gangs work. The prison system's tactic against them is to send gang leaders into security housing units where they're allowed no human interaction, but somehow are still able to pass notes. They're still able to call somebody and talk in some sort of gang code on the phones, and they're still able to order stabbings and control the drug trade from inside of the security housing unit, which begs the question, why don't we have the death penalty anymore? But I won't go into that. We believe, there are many people in America who believe that the government should not be allowed to kill one of their citizens. But if there's somebody who you cannot lock up so well, even if you lock someone up so well, if they're still able to sell drugs and order killings, should we not shoot them? I don't know. Now, the prison economy is run, of course, by the gangs. The prison economy is fueled mostly by tobacco, drugs, and prostitution. As you can see here, it's methamphetamines. Usually the drugs trafficked inside of prison are methamphetamines, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. But tobacco also has become such a large part of the prison drug trade because prisons in America used to give two packs of cigarettes to each prisoner every week. Now they completely banned tobacco inside of prison installations. So tobacco has become a great contraband good that prison gangs sell. These commodities are worth much more in prison than on the streets, sometimes selling for 10 times the original price, sometimes even more than that. For example, a can of tobacco worth $15 on the streets, like this one, is worth $500 in some prisons. Because there's a lot of people who smoke, basically. Those who cannot pay for these commodities sold to them by the gangs are either stabbed, subject to violence, or they pay for it with sex, and they become the sexual slaves of the prison gangs. Now, as for overcrowding, as previously mentioned, the United States currently faces a prison occupancy level of 107.6%, which doesn't seem very large until you realize that there's 2 million inmates in the United States. So 7.6% of 2 million is a lot. The reasons for the overcrowding can be factored into several categories, but all of them tend to lead back to the draconian nature of American law enforcement. As you can see here, this is a picture of an overcrowded prison. This is Pelican Bay State Penitentiary. It's where this is a gym that has been turned into like a dormitory, basically, and it holds 500 inmates in just that very small area. Now, as for the reasons of overcrowding, there's the war on drugs, excessively long sentencing. Like I said earlier, one of my high school classmates is serving 30 years in prison for selling heroin. And there's the discontinued use of the death penalty. But I won't go into that because it's a moral issue. I shouldn't even be arguing that. The war on drugs. Unlike many European countries where only selling drugs is illegal, in the United States, laws target both the seller and the user. When drug users are convicted, not only do their drug problems not go away, because we treat drugs as kind of we don't treat it as a health problem, we treat it as a criminal problem. And so, not only do their drug problems not go away, but they're pitted into the same prisons with the sellers. So they end up buying drugs in prison. Nearly 65% of all US inmates are drug addicts. That's a very, very high number, which really shows how ineffective our prisons are at stopping drugs from going in. Now, this graphic right here, it shows basically there's the pie for the state, for how many state inmates there are, and how many of those inmates are there for drug offenses. As you can see, half of federal inmates are there for drug offenses. And of course, there are, in the local jails, there are other people for drugs. But the overall message is, due to the war on drugs, 1 in 5 inmates in the United States are sentenced for drug charges. Now, here's the other things, excessive sentencing. Mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimum sentencing laws are laws which require a defendant charged with a particular crime to serve a minimum amount of years. What that means is that suppose I am caught smoking marijuana, then I must go to prison for at least 5 years. That's the lowest. And judges cannot make their own ruling, basically. They're the result of the drug hysteria in the 80s and 90s. They're used to deter street gangs by increasing the punishment. Although these laws are the product of good intentions, and they did work for a little while, they've led to unnecessary and excessive punishment against citizens, even if you do not have gang ties, in which these laws are created to target gang members. So, there was a man very recently that came up in the news, Weldon Angelos, a Hispanic man in the United States. In 2002, he was 20 years old when he was caught for 3 marijuana sales in 2004. But due to the fact that he had a gun on him, he was sentenced to 3 counts of selling narcotics while in possession of a firearm, which could not be served at the same time. They had to cut it into 3 parts, basically. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison when he was 24 years old for selling marijuana. The judge who sentenced him, Paul Castle, actually protested against this law, saying, this is his exact words. He said, if he had been an aircraft hijacker, he would have gotten 24 years in prison. If he had been a terrorist, he would have gotten 20 years in prison. If he was a child rapist, he would have gotten 11 years in prison. And now he's supposed to give him a 55-year sentence. Basically, Angelos, he was given the same sentence for selling marijuana as he would have gotten if he was an airplane hijacking, child raping terrorist, basically. The drug laws are absolutely insane in the United States, which leads me to conclude that the correction system in the United States is in theory supposed to practice 3 aspects. That's what it was created for in the 1800s. When we established asylums in the 1800s, we were supposed to, we made it with the idea of practicing punishment, isolation, and rehabilitation. Rehabilitation means bringing back these prisoners back into society. But of these 3, we only seem to practice 2 in the 2000s, as the goal has changed from rehabilitation, from habilitation, basically. And we are very, very good at punishing and isolating criminals, but we do very little in the way of rehabilitating them. Now, what led to this? In short, the problem with the prison system is that in America is that enormous castle-shaped structures are erected with a massive budget, like I showed you earlier, in the tens of millions of dollars. In order to justify the costs of these structures to the investors, the prisons are then pressed by state governments to run the prison as cheaply as possible. And this leads to understaffing, bad medical treatment, and the lack of rehabilitation services, all of which contribute to creating an atmosphere of fear, impatience, overcrowding, and anger. This problem is then magnified by the war on drugs, as drug addicts are sent to prison instead of drug rehabilitation, which gives more power to the gangs. Due to the long sentencing, many are in prison for life, resigning themselves to their new home, and raising their, which of course raises their chances of them joining a prison gang because they're never going to leave. So then you might as well put a kid there. Now, these gangs issue orders to members on the streets, making society even more dangerous than it was before they were in prison. So what can be done about this? To be honest, if a 19-year-old college student had the answer to what can be done about this, we wouldn't be in this mess. So I can't really come up with an idea, but all of the problems ultimately lead back to the fact that prisons are underfunded in the United States, which is because citizens don't really care enough. If we're going to have a safer, more productive populace, it's imperative that we make the citizens more aware of this problem, and therefore grant greater funding to the prison system. Nobody really cares about what prisoners have to go through, basically, because they're prisoners. They're the outcasts of society. But they are going to come back someday, unless they're in prison for life. And so if we're going to make people more safe, we need to ease the draconian nature of our law enforcement so that we don't just capture and imprison anybody who might be doing drugs. But most of all, we need to educate the people, both inside and outside of prison. And the way that we can do that is, of course, by stop using all these. We just need to stop basically allowing prison gangs to run the prisons, and then we can begin to educate the people inside the prisons. And of course, we need to educate the people outside of prison. So, thank you.
Okay, so any question? Yeah, Christine?
Can you study inside prison?
Sorry?
Can you study, like, get your bachelor degree?
You can in some prisons. It just depends on where you're sent, basically. And what are prisons in Europe like?
It depends on the country, but most of the countries, actually we say that being a prison is like being a hotel. You have your room with the bathroom inside, with television, you can play video games through the day. Most of the people study. You can get 1, 2, 3 degrees, chemistry degrees.
Wow.
So, I mean, one day you become unemployed when you apply to prison?
I guess it means if you're going to commit a crime in Europe, don't go to America.
Yeah. And actually, I always encourage the student, we need to have the visiting to the prison. Go to there. Actually, in Taichung, we have the very big prison in the Taichung. Maybe one day we can send application home to there, and then we go to there to do some visiting. everybody we will have some, or we got the same opportunity to join in the prison. Do you know why? Including you, including me. Okay, so we need to know the behavior. So I'm not sure in American the prison they prefer for punishment or for education.
It's mostly just
Punishment.
I once went to.
So actually, we can do very interesting research. We can use the duration analysis. I mean, when they enter in prison and when they exit, and after that, it's possible re-enter. They come back. Okay. So we need to try to do some analysis, and then, or maybe we can create some policy to let people, let their behavior change, become better. So I'm not sure you mean your classmate when he was studying in high school, and what problem they have? He may kill someone or do something.
He was selling heroin.
Pardon?
He was selling heroin. Which I thought was pretty despicable to do that, but I did visit him in prison one time. He just looked absolutely messed up after I went there. He started doing all sorts of drugs inside.
So the other way, in America, you can have the gun. You can buy a gun. So maybe someone has a gun, and then they do some behavior for whole society. So in Taiwanese society, we cannot have a gun because if we have gun, it's illegal, not legal. Okay. So in America, it's legal.
I have a gun.
Really?
Yes.
So you also kill someone?
No.
So why you have a gun? Or what?
Well, just because
How much did
I
you
think
how much did you buy?
it was about $200.
Only $200. Yes, you can have a gun.
I've had it. My father bought it from me when I was like 15 or so, and
So how many guns in your family?
a lot.
Really?
We have a whole a safe that we open up, and we have like 40 guns inside.
It's dangerous or not?
It's probably dangerous. It's probably dangerous. I don't know what.
No, actually, I also promotion for our government. One day, Taiwan, we need to open the policy. We need to have a gun. Because in Taiwanese society, the better guy always have a gun. A good guy, no gun. Okay? So we always got some trouble.
But I mean, we don't know who exactly the good guys with guns are, so.
No, everybody we can protect by ourselves. We can protect. I don't have to attend anyone. But if someone attend me, then I can protect by myself or protect for my family. But in Taiwan, you can look the outside on the window. We found the report say Taiwan is very peaceful city, peaceful country. Okay, but why so many buildings we got the steel the outside? Okay, in America, no. The outside of the window, it's only window, not any steel.
Oh,
Can
my house had bars. I grew up in a pretty dangerous neighborhood, so
Oh, really?
we had to have.
But
guns.
in Spain, no. Only window. Yeah, no any steel. That's all right. So you don't need provide any protection.
In Spain, if someone steals that don't used to be a Spanish person, it's not going to be like use the force. And for instance, in Madrid or in Barcelona, we have some problems with the pickpockets. They always look just to get less than 300 euros, because if they get more than 300 euros, they go to the jail. So,
What?
Our pickpockets, they just get less than 300 euros. Or for instance, if you have a phone, they usually don't steal an iPhone. They steal a cheaper phone because they know that if the value is over 300 euros, they go to the jail.
Wow.
Okay, gentlemen, yes?
I actually thought about having a gun. Everyone have a gun would be a bad idea, because in American, everyone can have a gun because it's legal, and you can buy a gun very cheap, just like you just said, $200. And I have heard in Australia, which guns are illegal, and everyone, if he wants to buy a gun, he has to pay about 40 times than the American. If you get 40 times $20 will be $800. If you get $800, why you still $8,000 per year? You can just buy your meal instead of using those money to buy a gun to kill on someone.
That's a very good point. The only problem is that I don't think that'll ever happen in America.
Yeah.
Just because the number one lobbyist in Congress, the number one company that spent the most money for lobbying in Congress last year was a gun company, followed by Comcast. So I don't think that's ever going to change, at least in the next 50 years.
And what's about the tourism? Because yesterday there was an attack in United Kingdom. I think if in United Kingdom or in France they could have like the American system, there could be like 5 attacks per day.
Yeah.
So any idea about terrorism?
Terrorism.
Yeah.
That's something I never quite got. Was that
We find someone and then we kill them or anything?
is that terrorism is kind of a European issue. I mean, we're across the Atlantic. There's hardly any terrorists in the United States, and yet we're the ones who care about it the most. I never quite understood that, but
Okay. Yeah, and I think you already presented a good topic here, okay? So in Chinese philosophy, we would like to talk. If we only concerned about the punishment, then the people will lose their mind, okay? So it's easy to re-enter again, okay? Because his mind will not change. He just say, in punishment, okay, and then I will reject again, or maybe I made the better things again. So their behavior is not any change. But in the Chinese philosophy, it's very important for education. We need to have the people in prison, then try to do some change, become better. Okay, maybe the people lost their job, become unemployed. So they did something wrong. If we can provide a good education, provide a good training or practice for them, then they have a good ability, try to find a normal job. Then they can say goodbye with the prison. If not, then we easily to re-enter again. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe in the future you can try to find more surveyor for my research. Try to do more analysis. I think this is quite good. So I use the biostatistics. Okay, we can test when they enter and then when they exit for the duration. Okay, it's 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, or like the for the days. This the penalties, right? Yes.
Death penalty.
Yeah. I'm not sure in American or in Spain it's legal or illegal.
I think in all of Europe we don't have the capital punishment.
But now the Taiwan we have. If you did something bad or something poor, then the government can punish 2 days. Okay. But
I think it's good.
in the Asian country, this is very important.
For instance, in my country, I think most of the people don't agree with that because if you kill someone, you just go 15 years to the prison. And it's like in some countries it's death, and in other
But
countries
this is unfair.
Yeah.
This is unfair. For example, you buy the metro and someone lost their mind, kill you.
No, for me, I don't like it.
Yeah. So this guy already punished today. Do you know the guy? Maybe 3 years ago, or in Taipei, in the Taipei metro. Okay, he killed a lot of people. I'm not sure his name.
Zheng Jie.
Yes.
But I thought that won't be the situation that people in the metro system will get a gun. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe the people they just use the mobile phone, so they are not find anything special. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Have someone want to continue? Or, yeah.
My name is Waylon Lee, and I'm going to talk about the tourism industry in Taiwan. Let's start. So, this is a simple question. I guess everyone can know the answer. Is the tourism brings money, so we don't like it. This is the chart that shows the proportion of the tourists who came to Taiwan in the past 10 years, which you can see in 2007, this line is represented as Chinese tourism. It's actually 0. In 2007, because of the special relationship between Taiwan and Chinese, so the Chinese can come to Taiwan without like some special reason, and of course the tourist is not allowed to go to Taiwan. And in 2007, the new president Ma Ying-jeou has changed this. They the airline to connect with China and Taiwan, so the people can just come to Taiwan very easily. And you can see the number of the Chinese tourists have increased in a very dramatic way. And to 2015, the number have become 4 million, which became the major part of the Taiwan tourist industry. So something went wrong when it comes to 2016. You can see the number decreased about the numbers decrease, and I'm gonna show you the reason. And here is the president from 2008 to 2016. His name is Lin Zhou, which is the Chinese Nationalist Party, and the major ideal of the Chinese Nationalist Party are now become like get closer to China in order to get more economic development. And since that he became the president of Taiwan, so
this you need to use the KMT.
yeah, KMT. We usually call it as KMT, but this is their official English name. Although all Taiwanese can call Kuomintang as KMT. And in 2008, they allowed Chinese tourists to come to Taiwan by travel agents. In 2009, we finally get a cross-strait charter, which let the airplane go between China and Taiwan. Now, before that, if we want to go to China, we have to go to Hong Kong first, then we go to China, which costs a lot of time and money to do that. And in 2011, the major change is people in China can go to Taiwan by individual travel, which they can do at whatever they want when they're in Taiwan. So you can see his policy makes the number of the China tourists increase to 4 million. So what happened here? The next president is from Democracy and Progress Party, which the major ideal of them are make Taiwan independent, which it have changed because it's not gonna happen if you solve the history, because Taiwan is far weaker than China. But since that is their independence of Taiwan are the major part of the Democratic Progress Party, so the leader of China hate her. So in response, her became the president of Taiwan. The Chinese just decreased the number of tourists who come to Taiwan, and because Chinese government is special from the other country because they can fully control wherever their people want to go, so they can just limit the number of the tourists who come to Taiwan without any reason. Yeah. So here's the part that happens in 2016. So in Taiwan's tourism industry, everyone is crying and yelling for our government. Why is our government doing this? Because from 2008, we just focusing on Chinese tourism because they bring a lot of money, they get a lot of people, and all our tourism industry are focusing on service then, because they are the most customer would come to their store or hotel. And since that, those hotels are focusing on Chinese tourists lose a lot of money during 2016 and even now because of China. So that's made them depressed. But is that really that bad? Here's the question, really that bad? Okay, so if you want to go to travel to another country, here's two ways you can do it. First will be the travel agency, and then another one would be individual travel. And since China is really special relationship between Taiwan, so most of the people can only choose travel agency. And here comes the problem. Who gains the profit? The store in those places, and the bus driver and the bus company, and the hotel, of course. It seems wonderful, right? All the Taiwanese can get profit from this kind of way. But the main question is, since the people in China come to Taiwan by travel agency, those travel agency, of course, are Chinese travel agency, and they can just plan whatever they want, and they can bring those tourists to the store opened by Chinese in Taiwan, the Chinese bus company, and also the hotel opened by Chinese. So where does the money go? Back to China. So most of the profits are not getting to Taiwanese, are back to Chinese. We all know this theory. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And here is the whole Taiwan industry. We are doing the same thing, is put all our eggs into a basket called Chinese tourists. And that is the real problem. If you want to put your eggs, you're definitely not going to do it in this way. So instead of focusing on Chinese tourists, I think it's also important to look the other way. Like during 2016, the number of the other countries' tourists has also increased. And if you look closely, the number of all the countries from the other 8 regions, all of them can almost as same as the number decrease of the Chinese tourists. So which means, although the Chinese tourist is decreased, but the number of all tourists are actually increased. So the people who actually suffer from the decrease of the Chinese tourists are those people who are focusing on serving those Chinese. But the normal store that sell all the stuff to other tourists didn't suffer from that. Actually, they're happy because other countries consider as the Chinese, the Chinese image. You saw Chinese, like there are a lot of people talking loudly, and because the decrease of the Chinese, they then feel like Taiwan is a better place for travel. So you can see the number of the tourists from the other country are increased in a better way. So why don't we just, instead of waiting that the Chinese to decide the number of the tourists to come to Taiwan, and if they one day something like this happen, we fight each other, and things gonna become like this. So this is my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so any question? Yeah, Joe?
Do you think that China, alright, so since we already kind of established that Taiwan doesn't really have the power to really strong arm China, do you think that Taiwan will ever become part of China?
I think because the China and America become the 2 superpowers in the world right now. I think it's might gonna happen. Yeah, always have to think the worst way. Yeah. But also another thing is, the Japanese government also find out that the Chinese tourists have become one of the major part of Japanese tourist industry. So what the Japanese government do is they limit the number of every tourism agency, a travel agency. If they have too many Chinese customer, they have to pay more tax. And if they get more like the other country, like Korea and Taiwan, and in a balanced way, they can save more money from tax. So it's more healthy for any country to serve other tourism, not just for China. Yeah.
When I was in high school, I used to work in a department store where I would serve Chinese customers, and they were just, I mean, I don't like to trash talk people, but they weren't the nicest tourists out there.
Yeah.
Is there like do Taiwanese people kind of have that image of Chinese as well?
What I thought about is most of the people, if they go individual travel, are a very good customer, but most of them are just, follow the travel agency and they don't have to think about what they want to go, and they see some tower, oh, the big tower, hey. It's just like that the difference between normal Chinese tourism or from the individual travel is huge change, Yeah. I do believe there's very nice Chinese tourism out there, but some of the example I saw is not so good. Yeah, and I kind of asked for like the Japanese, and they also get the same image.
For instance, in our country we have problems with British, also German, but especially British tourists. But for instance, we don't have problem with Chinese people because British young people used to come to Spain, and because we have like more freedom, like to go party, to drink in the street, things like that. They used to be very noisy, and for instance, there are some neighborhood associations that they say that there are a lot of British tourists that run naked in the street, enter naked in the supermarket. So we have also the problems that British tourists jump from the balcony in the hotels to the swimming pool, and every year we have like maybe 10 or 20 deaths because of that. Just that. We don't have this idea of Chinese tourism.
Okay, good.
Maybe because we are like Japan and Taiwan are one of the close countries to China, so we will get more Chinese tourism. And if there is a huge number of some countries' tourism, there must be some bad. And most of the time, the people only know the best, because if you behave like a normal person, nobody will gonna know you. Yeah, I guess it works like that way.
Okay, you only mentioned the Chinese or another country come to Taiwan. I think you need to try to change another direction. How about Taiwanese go to China, go to another Asian country? You need to compare. So in particular, from the 2015, the proportion of the China decreased. And how about the Taiwanese go to China? Is decreased or increased? Yeah. So I think this is all interesting. You need to compare the different direction. Okay. And the other way, actually, in economical factor, Taiwan dependent on China so much.
Yeah.
Before 2000, most international trade of Taiwan dependent on America, maybe near 40% to 50%. But now it changed. Taiwan dependent on China more than 50%, import and export. Okay, so now the China, they don't need to attend Taiwan. If one day the China close the door for Taiwan, then Taiwan economic would be fall down. Okay, and now a lot of young generation is difficult to find a job from Taiwan. So most young generation, when they graduated, they must go to China. Okay, and now the China government opened the door for the young generation from Taiwan. They say, okay, if you cannot find a job in Taiwan, you can come to China. So we dependent on China so much. Okay, so we cannot reject. It's not only for tourism. Okay, so it's a special. Actually, it's very typical for Taiwan situation. So before this class, we already have a special talk something about Taiwan and China. So, but I think you already did very well. So if possible, you can try to find another information. How about Taiwanese? Go to China, go to Asia country. So for example, South Korea. Okay, most Taiwanese prefer go to Japan. Okay, and now the Chinese prefer come to Taiwan. So maybe we can connect. Sometime we can learn something from Japan, and then we can transfer some behavior or some technology to China. And then we can connect, we can create a more international business as well. Okay? So yeah, you did very well. So thank you. All right, so today I think, can we stop here? Okay, and next week we can continue, okay?